So whilst this red squirrel happily enjoys nibbling his nuts, I thought I'd tell you a bit about my last few months and why I haven't been on YouTube as much as I should have been. You see, if you look at my first videos, like the Capercaillie one, you'll see I'm wearing a rather expensive, nice Gore-Tex jacket from Berghaus. By about video 6, it's starting to be a bit snug. In fact, heavy breathing may well end up ripping the zip or the seams. So, sadly, lockdown didn't do a good job for me, and I ended up back in an older waterproof, not as good, but bigger. Now, over the last few years, I've almost certainly lost more than you weigh now, whoever you are watching this, wherever you are. I've lost a huge amount of weight and got much fitter, but that was starting to slip. So I've been back to doing around 10 hours of hard exercise, and I mean hard exercise, a week. And on a very restricted diet, trying to get myself back. And I'm now back into the really nice jacket, but that has come on the cost of not being able to do so many videos. You see, after a really hard, like 30-mile bike ride or 2 hours in the gym, you may think you can then start editing films, but normally what happens is you find yourself falling asleep, head down on the desk, quite often on top of the keyboard, which can be quite painful after a while. So I'm back into the nice jacket. I'm also doing a few challenges coming up. So I've always called this site Ian Hay Wildlife, and that is meant to be about the wildlife of Scotland, but also about having a wild life, doing interesting and silly things. So I've got a few events coming up. I've got a 10-hour mountain bike race, me doing a 10-hour mountain bike race, a duathlon, but I've also got the wildlife content, so hopefully I've got the waterfall video coming out soon and the next bird in flight video coming out soon. So I hope you enjoy this. It's a slightly different video to what you'll be used to from me, but should be quite good fun anyway. See you a bit later. Mornings, today's the day of the big bike ride. So we'll be attempting to ride from here on the Black Isle to Fort William via the Great Glen Way. So we'll see how it gets on. As you can probably see behind me, we've got snow. And here's Ollie. Come on, Ollie. Come and say hello. So Ollie is going to South Korea next year, and this is one of the things we're doing to pay for it. So we've set up a fundraiser on Facebook if you want to go and maybe donate, and in return for that you can get to watch us suffer on a cold snowy day in April, cycling over 80 miles. Fun. The things you do for your kids. So the Great Glen Way runs between the west coast of Scotland at Fort William to the east coast at Inverness. It covers a wide range of scenery between the two places, most famously running along the length of Loch Ness itself. However, our accommodation was on the Black Isle, about 10 kilometres or 6 miles from the start of the route. So just to make our life even harder, we decided to cycle that 6 kilometres to get to Inverness, which is where we are now on the video. From here, the first stage is the hardest. It's about 20 miles and it covers about 600 metres, 2,000 feet of climbing. You then end up at Drumnadrochit, ready to carry on to the next stage, which is again a really difficult, hard uphill one, to Invermoriston before an easier section to Fort Augustus. From Fort Augustus to the sea normally takes walkers about 3 days. In fact, the whole route normally takes people about 6 days on foot. But from Fort Augustus to the sea in Fort William is about 35 miles, but it's largely downhill along the side of the Caledonian Canal. So really, by the time you've got to Fort Augustus, you're there. You just have to blast along at high speed and get the rest of the ride done. Alright, so we're riding along the river in Inverness. Just gone over the 10k mark, and it's a beautiful place. So we're now 10k into the ride and probably 1k into the Great Glen Way, and it's going to be a bit of a challenge because there's a heck of a lot of snow in front of us. So our plans that we had earlier on for doing the high level routes, I think, are scuppered. However, the first section is going to be fairly high level anyway. Oh, is this a great big Great Glen Way sign? So we're across this bridge. Yep. So we're now on the island in Inverness, in the river. Over the bridge again. Yeah, it says signpost. We need to keep an eye out for the Great Glen Way signpost. Oh, this is nice. I'm going to just stop and show you the view. Beautiful. So this section of the ride goes along the islands in the River Ness. The River Ness is a mighty salmon river, quite short. It just connects Loch Ness with the sea. But you can quite often see fishermen along this stretch trying to catch big salmon. You can get some massive fish caught on this river. The ride then crosses a couple of bridges before going past a really nice play park, and I remember many hours with Ollie as a small child playing on the swings and going on the little boating lake, and look at him now leaving his poor daddy behind on the mountain bike. Once you cross the river, you head past the park and you actually follow the Caledonian Canal for a short distance before starting to gain some serious height. Firstly, up to the Nature Scott building, which has a great elevated position over Inverness. From the Nature Scott building, it then starts climbing steeply again, and it actually led to what was probably one of our favourite parts of the whole trip. You see, we started getting into the snow not long after leaving Inverness behind, but it wasn't too bad and the actual path was okay, so it was actually really good fun, but not quite as fast as it looks here. As the snow kept getting deeper and deeper, we started to realise we were in a bit of trouble with this ride. You see, you can ride in the other people's tracks, but it's quite difficult because if you try and leave them, you can sort of slip and slide. So it's best to try and push your own way through the snow. But that is absolutely energy sapping. Also, when you get to a downhill, instead of it being a really good fun sort of whizzing down the hill at high speed, it becomes a case of just trying to stay on the bike and going down very slowly, trying not to end up wrapped around a deer fence. We also had another problem, which was that the signs showing us the way were generally covered in snow. This bit us badly once we got to a road section not long after this, where we're heading along the road at probably 30 miles an hour going down a hill, and we suddenly realised that there were no hills scheduled for that part of the ride. So we had to turn around and ride back up the hill on the road before we got to this point. Again, this should have been an easy section, and ahead of us were a couple of really good people who were on gravel bikes, and I admit I was quite happy overtaking people. It did make me feel good. It was also especially useful as I dropped a really key piece of equipment somewhere around here, which they picked up and gave us later on while we were having lunch at Drumnadrochit. So a big thank you to these two gravel bikers, and how they managed to get down some of the hills that were coming up soon after this, which would have been a little bit technical without the snow. In the snow they were horrendous. We carried along, and it got to about the highest point of the day soon after this, and every bit of brown path was greeted with a cheer. It was seriously hard work, and by the time we got to Drumnadrochit we were seriously behind. This first section had taken probably twice as long as expected. So we carried on down with a few patches of sort of muddy brown stuff like this, but mostly on the snow until we got all the way down to the road. Interestingly, passing a RNLI lifeboat station, which I never realised we had lifeboat stations on lakes in Britain, but this one certainly was. After a very welcome lunch in Drumnadrochit, we headed back uphill again, and that was very tough. It had already been relatively long days mountain biking at this point. We headed back up into quite high ground again, back up into the snow, and the good thing was we actually came across some really quite nice sort of single track fun bits of riding. These were really good, and the snow was lessening, so we managed to do a few technical bits, although we weren't quite brave enough to go for this ford. But we carried on, and yeah, it was good fun, but very, very tiring. Well, it's Fort Augustus, and we failed. If you call doing our longest ever ride failing, about 82 kilometres, just over 50 miles we managed to do, and we got beaten by the snow. It was 6 inches deep at places, and if you've never seen a video of the mega avalanche, have a look, because some of the downhills were quite similar to it. It was going down like a tripod with one leg out at times. It was horrendous, but it was good fun.
To be continued. A couple of tips if you want to do this. I do think that this ride is a good one to do in a day. It's a challenging long day, but set off earlier. We didn't set off until 9 because it was raining until then. It was bad weather earlier on, so we were waiting until the weather cleared to set off. Start at the start of the Great Glen Way. We started quite a few kilometres the other side, 10 kilometres away from it, so we had a 10-kilometre ride before we'd even set off. Oh, and yeah, as I say, it's a long day. We'll be back. To be continued.